He saved my daughter from a predator in the dead of night, violent, fearless, and gone before I could even say thank you. But when I saw the tattoo on his hand, I knew exactly who he was, the man who vanished after killing my brother 20 years ago. Now I have to ask myself the one question no father should ever face. Did he save her or mark her? It happened fast. 1 second, Ava was walking toward her car after a late shift at the diner, texting her best friend. And the next, a hand was clamped around her mouth, dragging her into the shadows behind the gas station. She didn't have time to scream. She barely saw his face, only the stench of sweat and cigarettes, the glint of something sharp in his other hand. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it would explode in her chest. Then everything shifted. The sound came first, a low, guttural engine, like a beast growling through steel. Tires screeched, boots hit gravel, and then the man was gone, thrown to the ground like a rag doll. Ava stumbled back, gasping for air, and saw him, broad-shouldered, all black, helmet off. He didn't speak. He just stood over her attacker, fists clenched, tattoos snaking down both arms. One hit, then another, and another. The man on the ground screamed. Bones cracked, blood spilled. Ava backed away, frozen, heart racing. "Stop," she whispered, but the biker didn't stop until the guy stopped moving. Then he turned. For a moment, his eyes met hers, gray, cold, tired. He didn't ask if she was okay, didn't check if she was hurt. He just nodded once, slow and deliberate, and walked back to his bike. The engine roared to life, and like smoke, he vanished into the night before she could even ask his name. The police showed up 10 minutes later. Ava stood trembling, wrapped in a blanket from the store clerk, trying to explain what happened. The man who attacked her was unconscious, bleeding from the mouth, possibly a broken jaw. When they asked who saved her, she said, "I don't know." He didn't say anything, just showed up. They looked at each other. One officer muttered something about vigilantes and paperwork, but none of that mattered to her. Daniel arrived half an hour later, out of breath, his truck half parked on the sidewalk. He rushed to her, wrapping her in his arms, whispering that she was safe now, that he should have picked her up, that he was sorry, so damn sorry. She didn't cry until then, and once she started, she couldn't stop. The moment the adrenaline dropped, everything shook loose. Later that night, when Daniel tucked her in and turned off the light, he sat in the living room, unable to sleep. He stared out the window at the empty street, one hand clutching the armrest, grateful, furious, terrified. Who was the man who saved his daughter? Why didn't he wait? Why did he disappear? He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't the first time that man had crossed paths with his family, and it wouldn't be the last. It was 3 days later when Daniel saw him again, sitting in the far corner booth of Marla's diner, same black leather jacket, same heavy boots, same silence. Gage. That's what the name tag on his coffee cup said, scribbled in Sharpie by the teenage waitress who didn't dare ask for more. He sat alone, staring through the window like he was watching something no one else could see. Ava spotted him first. Her breath caught in her throat, but not in fear, in something else. Curiosity, maybe? Recognition. She told her dad in a whisper, like it was a secret too fragile to speak aloud. "That's him. That's the guy." Daniel turned slowly, and when he saw the man who'd saved his daughter, the gratitude he thought he'd feel never came. Instead, it was caution, instinct, a coiled tension in his gut. He'd always trusted that gut. It kept him alive through years of raising a daughter alone, through layoffs and loss. It said something was off. Gage didn't react when they entered, didn't even look up from his coffee until Ava approached. She was slow, hesitant, like she wasn't sure why she was doing it but couldn't stop herself. Daniel stayed behind, watching every step. She said, "Thank you for the other night." Gage didn't smile. He just nodded. "You all right?" he asked, voice low, rough like gravel soaked in smoke. Ava nodded back. That was it. No handshake, no story, no smile. She slid into the booth across from him without asking, and Daniel felt something cold grip his spine. Gage didn't seem surprised, didn't shoo her away, just let her talk. About school, about work, about how her dad was freaking out. Gage barely spoke, but he listened, not like a man bored out of politeness, like a man who had nowhere else to be. Daniel walked over, jaw tight, and put a hand on Ava's shoulder. "We should go," he said, eyeing Gage with the kind of look that says more than words. Gage met his gaze, calm and unreadable. "Your girl's tough," he said. Daniel didn't reply. Back at home, Ava was quiet, not scared, just thoughtful. "He's not what I expected," she said. Daniel kept his thoughts to himself. He didn't trust men who said too little, didn't trust ones who showed up in your life without warning and vanished just as fast. And yet, there was no denying what the man had done. He had saved her. That counted for something. Still, that night, Daniel stood at the window again, watching the street. He couldn't shake the feeling that Gage hadn't saved Ava by chance, that his reappearance in the diner wasn't random, and that he hadn't come back for recognition or thanks. He'd come back for a reason. Daniel just didn't know what it was yet. It started with glimpses. Gage parked across the street from the school pickup line, leaning against his bike, arms folded, not moving. Then he was at the grocery store, not shopping, just standing near the exit as Ava and Daniel walked out with their bags. Always in the periphery, never close, never far. Ava noticed first, but she didn't flinch. "He's looking out for me," she said. Daniel didn't answer. He was too busy scanning for something that made sense. The town began to notice. In a place where everyone knows everyone, a man like Gage stands out like blood on snow. The diner girls called him the ghost on wheels. At the barbershop, someone joked that the Reaper had come early for retirement. But behind the laughter were murmurs about his silence, his scars, the way his eyes never blinked too long, like he was always ready for something to explode. Daniel hated how calm Ava was about it. "You don't even know him," he told her one evening. "He's not your friend." She shrugged. "He's not doing anything wrong." She paused. "He saved me. That means something." Daniel wanted to argue, but part of him knew she wasn't wrong, and that's what made it worse. It was easier to hate a villain, not a question mark. Gage never approached their house, never crossed the line. But he was there, watching from the gas station, parked across the street at the park. Once, Daniel spotted him sitting on a bench, staring at the ducks while kids screamed in the background. The sun hit the tattoos on his forearms, an eagle, a broken clock, and something twisted and sharp like barbed wire. Daniel stared at him from behind the wheel, engine idling, and for a split second, Gage turned and looked right at him. No smile, no nod, just recognition, like he'd been waiting. Later that week, Daniel finally snapped. He walked across the parking lot where Gage was smoking, alone beside his bike. "What the hell do you want?" Daniel asked, not yelling, but every word laced with steel. Gage exhaled slowly. "I'm not here for you." He tossed the cigarette and stepped onto the bike. "Not yet." The engine roared before Daniel could respond. Gage was gone again, like smoke. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He replayed the words, "Not yet." What did that mean? Was this man protecting his daughter or circling her? Like a vulture waiting for something to die? In the days that followed, Daniel noticed something darker creeping into Ava. She was distracted, distant, and she smiled when she saw Gage from afar, like it was some unspoken connection. A guardian angel, she called him once. But Daniel had seen angels before. They didn't wear leather. They didn't carry that look in their eyes, and they didn't say things like, "Not yet." The evening was slow and thick with humidity, one of those nights where even the silence felt heavy. Daniel stood in line at the liquor store, picking up a bottle of bourbon he hadn't touched in months. His hands were steady, but his mind wasn't. He hadn't told Ava, but he'd started carrying again, just a small pistol in the glove compartment. Nothing fancy, just enough to matter if it came to it. And lately, he'd started to believe it might. Gage was at the counter, paying for a bottle of water and a black coffee from the cooler. Daniel didn't notice him at first, not until Gage reached into his back pocket and the sleeve of his jacket rode up. Just a few inches, just long enough. The ink caught Daniel's eye like a punch to the chest. A jagged V wrapped in thorns, a symbol not found in any alphabet, just the kind of thing that sticks in a boy's brain when he watches his brother die in a pool of beer and blood. Daniel didn't move, didn't blink. That symbol had haunted him for 2 decades. He'd only seen it once before, on the hand that threw the final punch, the punch that cracked Travis's skull against the bar rail, silencing his laugh forever. It had been a brawl, drunken, stupid, chaotic. But that mark? That wasn't a random piece of ink. That was a brand. Gage didn't notice him. He walked out slow, taking a sip from the coffee, disappearing into the dusk like it was his job. Daniel stood frozen, bottle in hand, vision tunneling. When he got outside, Gage was gone again. Of course he was. He always was. That night, Daniel went into the attic. He hadn't opened that box in years. It still had the police reports, the newspaper clippings, the blurry photo of the suspect who was never found. A bar fight turned manslaughter, they called it. The killer fled town before they could identify him. But Daniel remembered that hand, that tattoo, the smirk, the way the guy vanished into the crowd while Travis lay gasping for breath. He stayed up all night piecing it together. The timelines, the scars, the age, the voice, the cold, empty stare that never lingered long enough to read. And he knew. He didn't want to know, but he did. Gage wasn't just some drifter who happened to save Ava. He wasn't a random biker with a guilty conscience and a good punch. He was the man who killed Daniel's brother, and now he was back, shadowing his daughter like he had a right to be there. Daniel didn't tell Ava. Not yet. He wasn't sure what to say, but he knew one thing in his bones. This wasn't over. It had never been over. Daniel sat at the edge of the attic floor, legs crossed like a man preparing for war with his own past. The cardboard box sat in front of him like a tomb. Yellowed tape, black marker. Travis, do not open. He had written those words himself 15 years ago, the night after he buried his brother, not for safety, for survival, because what was inside didn't heal, it burned. He peeled the tape slowly, like opening old wounds deserved respect. Dust clouded the air as he lifted the lid. Inside, time had decayed everything but the weight. A wrinkled stack of papers, faded photographs, a torn page from a newspaper with a headline that read, "Bar fight turns deadly, suspect at large." Daniel's fingers trembled as he picked up the report. It all came rushing back, the sirens, the blood on his shoes, the way their mother collapsed at the morgue. Travis hadn't been perfect, loudmouth, hot temper, but he was Daniel's only sibling, the only one who'd had his back when the world didn't. And Gage, if that really was him, had taken that from him. He flipped through the file until he reached the photo. A police mugshot, grainy, only half a face, long hair, blood down the side of the jaw. No name. The photo was found in a police officer's personal file. He'd been chasing leads off the record before the case was shelved. But Daniel stared into the eye that was visible. That cold, detached stare. The same stare that had lingered on Ava from across the parking lot. The same one that didn't blink when Daniel asked, "What do you want?" He held the photo up beside a picture he'd taken on his phone, one he'd snapped from his truck when Gage wasn't looking. Side profile. Poor lighting. But it was enough. The structure of the face. The scar that curved down the left cheek like a knife that had nearly finished the job. Same man. Older. Harder. Alive. Daniel's hands shook. He took a breath and held it until it hurt. He wanted to scream, break something, but he couldn't. Ava was downstairs. She still saw a savior, a protector. And how do you tell your daughter that her guardian angel is the devil who murdered your brother? The next morning, Daniel called the only cop he still trusted, Rick Salazar, now retired, who used to work homicide and never let go of things easy. They met behind the hardware store where no one could hear them. "Look at this," Daniel said, handing him both photos. Rick studied them. His jaw clenched. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "That's him." He nodded once. "But if he came back after all these years, it's not for you." Daniel already knew. It was for her. The bell above the diner door jingled like a warning shot, and every eye turned toward Daniel as he stepped inside. He hadn't meant to storm in like that, hadn't planned anything beyond the drive there. But the rage had been building for days, coiling around his ribs like barbed wire. And when he saw Gage, sitting in that same damn booth with his back to the wall and his coffee barely touched, it snapped. Daniel walked straight up, the sound of his boots sharp against the tile. Gage looked up, calm, almost expectant. No flinch, no surprise. Just that same unreadable stare that had haunted Daniel since the moment he realized who the man really was. "You," Daniel said, voice low but tight, "have a hell of a nerve showing your face here." Gage didn't move. "I'm not hiding." Daniel leaned in, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "You think that makes you brave? You think watching her from a distance makes you some kind of protector? You murdered my brother. You took him from me." Gage's eyes didn't waver. "I remember." That was it. No excuse, no denial, just cold acceptance. Daniel's hands curled into fists, every cell screaming for release. But before he could speak again, a voice cut through the air behind him. "Wait, what did you say?" Ava stood at the entrance of the diner, still in her jacket, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her eyes darted between them, searching. "You know each other?" she asked, stepping forward. "What is this?" Neither man answered. "Dad?" Her voice rose. "What's going on?" Daniel turned toward her, panic rising in his chest, not because he didn't want to tell her, but because he didn't know how to say it without breaking something inside her that might never heal. Gage stood up slowly, towering but not threatening. "She deserves to know," he said, not looking at her, "but you're not ready to tell her, and she's not ready to hear it." Ava looked from her father to Gage, her face hardening. "Tell me what?" she demanded. "What is it you think I can't handle?" Silence stretched like wire between them. Gage stepped past Daniel, dropping a 20 on the table without looking back. As he reached the door, he paused just long enough to say one thing over his shoulder. "It's not what you think, but it's worse." Then he was gone. Ava stood there, eyes wide, breathing fast. "Dad," she said, voice shaking. "What the hell is going on?" Daniel couldn't find the words. His mouth opened, then closed again. He watched her take a step back, the distance between them growing in ways that had nothing to do with space. and for the first time since the night she was born, Daniel didn't know how to protect her. Rick Salazar poured 2 fingers of bourbon into each glass and slid one across the table without a word. His house smelled like old wood, cigar smoke, and memories that refused to fade. Daniel sat in the same chair he'd avoided for years, staring at the amber liquid like it might hold an answer. But the truth was already on the table: faded case files, notes in red ink, a yellowed photo of Travis Monroe with his signature cocky grin, and beneath it, a name Daniel hadn't seen in the official reports: Gage Mercer. He gave a fake name that night, Rick said, tapping the edge of the file. But a bartender remembered his real one: Mercer, fresh out of the military, quiet guy. Trouble followed him, but he didn't go looking for it. Daniel's throat tightened. Then why did he kill Travis? Rick leaned back, sighing like it hurt. That's the thing. He didn't throw the first punch. Travis did. Daniel looked up sharply. You know your brother, Dan. Loyal as hell, but drunk and full of pride. Dangerous combination. Rick picked up a photo from the stack. This guy, Leo Crowley, known for hitting women. That night, he had his hands on a waitress. Gage stepped in. Travis thought he was messing with the wrong girl and got in the middle. It escalated. Daniel blinked. So he was defending someone? Rick nodded. That waitress filed a statement, said Gage didn't want to fight, tried to de-escalate, but when Travis took a swing at him, Gage hit back just once. Travis fell wrong. Head hit the bar rail. You know the rest. Daniel rubbed his hands over his face. Why didn't this ever come out? The waitress vanished, disappeared the next day. No statement, no witness. Case went cold. Gage took off before they could question him. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. Either way, no body, no suspect, no story. Rick paused. But I always wondered why he ran, why he never came back. Daniel stared down at the glass. He didn't come back for me. He came back for Ava. Rick didn't say anything. Why? Daniel whispered. After all these years, why now? Rick lit a cigar and took a slow drag. Some debts take time to understand. Some ghosts don't haunt houses. They haunt people. Daniel sat there in the quiet, every truth unraveling the lies he'd wrapped around his brother's death. Travis wasn't innocent. Gage wasn't a monster. But the weight didn't lift. It just shifted. The facts were clearer now, but the questions were heavier. Why Ava? Why protect her? What did Gage still owe, and to whom? Daniel took one last look at the files before standing up. I need to talk to him. Rick nodded. Be careful. He's not the man you thought he was, but he's not the man you want him to be either. Daniel walked out into the night, carrying more than just the truth. He was carrying something far heavier. The possibility that everything he'd believed was wrong, and that the man shadowing his daughter wasn't finished yet. The storm came without thunder, just that quiet, creeping kind that tears at you from the inside. Daniel stood by the sink, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary, trying to silence the thoughts that had been screaming for days. Ava sat at the kitchen table, headphones out, posture stiff. She'd barely spoken all week. Every time he tried, she shut down. But tonight was different. Tonight, she stared at him like she wasn't his little girl anymore. I know about Mom, she said suddenly. Daniel's hands froze under the faucet. I know she didn't die from a car accident. Ava's voice didn't shake. I know it was pills. He turned slowly, the plate slipping from his hands and landing in the sink with a soft clatter. She looked up at him, calm, almost cold. Who told you that? He asked, though he already knew. Gage. The silence stretched until it snapped. Daniel stepped forward, anger rising like fire behind his eyes. You've been talking to him? Ava stood too. Yeah. You weren't saying anything, and he was. He told me about the overdose, about how you found her, about how you covered it up to protect me. Daniel couldn't breathe. And he told me about Uncle Travis, she added, about the bar fight, about how it wasn't just some random act of violence. You made it sound like he was attacked, like he was a victim. He was my brother, Daniel said, voice shaking. And he was drunk, Dad, Ava snapped. And he hit first. Gage told me everything. You think that makes it okay? Daniel's fists were clenched now. He still killed him. Yeah, she said, quieter. But he's not the only one who's been hiding things. It was a sucker punch without the fist. Daniel stepped back like her words had weight. And they did. Because he knew she was right. He said he didn't come back for you, she continued. He came back because he promised her he'd watch over me. Daniel's stomach twisted. Her? Who? Mom, Ava said. Daniel stared, the room closing in, air thick. That's impossible. No, Ava said, eyes locked on his. It's not. Gage had told her about a time before the overdose, about moments her mother had reached out for help from old friends, desperate to stay clean, to stay present. Gage had been one of those friends, not close, not constant, but enough. Enough to make a promise when no one else would listen. Daniel had buried all of it. To protect Ava, to protect himself. Now it was unraveling. You trusted him? Daniel asked. I don't know, she whispered, but at least he didn't lie. The words didn't just sting. They hollowed him. Ava turned and walked upstairs without waiting for a reply. And Daniel stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the truth he tried to bury and the silence he no longer controlled. The past wasn't just back. It had been in his house the whole time. Gage was waiting behind the mechanic's garage, arms crossed, cigarette burning slow between two fingers. It was past midnight, but Daniel had left the house hours ago, driving nowhere, chasing answers he wasn't ready for. He found himself pulling in without thinking, like some part of him already knew where the next truth lived. You're out late, Gage said, not turning around. Daniel stepped out of the truck, hands trembling with restraint. She told me. Gage nodded once. Good. I don't want good. I want the rest of it. The cigarette hit the gravel. Gage crushed it under his boot and finally turned. His face looked older in the flickering security light. More tired, more human. I didn't come back to be forgiven, he said. I came back to finish something. Daniel folded his arms, anger barely contained. Finish what? A promise, Gage said. Made it to your wife, and again, in prison. Daniel blinked. What? 2 years after Travis died, I turned myself in, Gage said, voice like sandpaper. Did time for assault. Not for him. There was never enough to charge me, but I'd been running too long. Figured I had to pay something. Daniel didn't speak, just watched. There was a guy inside, Gage continued. Rourke, ex-gang, ex-human. Bad history with your brother, believe it or not. He used to run with him before they had a falling out. Money, drugs, doesn't matter. He had it out for both of us. Said if I ever got out, he'd come for someone close. Daniel's mouth was dry. Why Ava? Gage stepped closer. Because her name was the only one I ever said aloud. Because he knew I made a promise to her mother. And because Rourke doesn't threaten, he hunts. Daniel's stomach twisted. The guy who attacked Ava behind the gas station? Gage said. That wasn't random. That wasn't a junkie. That was a message. Everything fell into place, cold and sharp like shattered glass. I took care of the first one, Gage said. But there'll be more. Rourke's out. He's building something again. Quiet. Controlled. And he wants to punish me. Daniel looked away, the world spinning in too many directions. "You should have come to me," he muttered. Gage's eyes burned into him. "Would you have believed me?" Daniel didn't answer. "I'm not here for redemption," Gage said. "I'm here because I owe her. Your wife saved me once, even when she couldn't save herself, and I swore I'd watch over her kid if the day ever came." He reached into his jacket and handed Daniel a folded photo, faded and creased. Ava as a baby, in her mother's arms, Gage standing behind them, younger, smiling like he hadn't yet lost everything. Daniel stared at it, heart caught in his throat. "I'm not the villain in this story," Gage said, "but I'm not the hero either." Then he walked off into the dark, and for the first time Daniel wasn't sure which one the town needed more. Daniel couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that alley behind the gas station, saw his daughter screaming, saw Gage standing over a man broken and bloodied. But now he understood. It wasn't rage. It was a warning. That night hadn't been an act of chance. It had been the opening shot in a war that had never really ended. By morning, Daniel was back at Rick Salazar's place, banging on the door before the sun even cleared the trees. Rick opened it in sweatpants, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "This better be good," he muttered, then saw the look on Daniel's face. No more questions. Inside, the bourbon stayed on the shelf. This wasn't a drinking conversation. "Ever heard of a guy named Rourke?" Daniel asked. Rick's face went still. "Yeah. Leonard Rourke. Real piece of work. Used to run guns through Nevada in the 90s. Rumor was he built a whole network inside, recruited guys on the inside and out, but he disappeared after a prison riot. We thought he was dead." "He's not," Daniel said. "He's back, and he's after Gage, after Ava." Rick sat down, exhaling slow. Then this just got a hell of a lot uglier. They pulled up old files, arrest reports, surveillance photos, redacted affidavits. Rourke had kept quiet for over a decade, but the trail never really vanished. The FBI had tried to flip a few of his men, but no one talked. One photo caught Daniel's eye. A family burned out in their car outside Reno. Former gang member, wife, daughter, official cause, accidental fire. But the timing lined up. So did the name. Daniel's jaw tightened. "They're killing families." Rick nodded grimly. "The ones who left. The ones who betrayed the old code. Looks like Rourke's cleaning house. Quiet. Surgical. And he's starting with people like Gage. And people like my daughter," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't go home after that. He drove the outskirts of town instead, looking at every parked van, every motorcycle he didn't recognize. He called Ava, told her to stay at the house, lock the doors. She asked why. He lied. Again. But deep down, he knew the truth couldn't stay buried much longer. Back at the edge of town, Daniel found Gage in an abandoned parking lot, kneeling beside his bike, fiddling with something under the seat. When he looked up, his eyes were dead calm. "They're watching the house," Gage said before Daniel could speak. "I picked up a tail last night. Same guy who was behind the gas station job." Daniel's heart sank. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I needed to be sure who they were after." "And?" "They're after both of us now," Gage said. "You just didn't know you were already in the war." Daniel looked at the stranger in front of him, the man he once hated, now the only one standing between his daughter and a legacy of blood. Rourke wasn't coming. He was already here. The wind howled across the old lumberyard at the edge of town, the kind of place built for silence and forgotten deals. Daniel stood with his back to the shipping container, his chest heaving, one hand holding Ava tight against his side. Gage knelt a few feet ahead, scanning the tree line, eyes focused, jaw locked. The sun had just slipped below the hills, painting the sky with the last streaks of gold, and that's when the engines started. 3 bikes, then a 4th, Then a van. They rolled in slow, like wolves circling meat. No rush, no fear. Rourke stepped out of the van first, tall, lean, sunglasses on, even as the night settled in. His smile was like a knife wrapped in velvet. "Well, damn," he said, arms wide. "The prodigal bastard brought friends." Gage rose to his feet, every movement controlled, deliberate. "You should have stayed buried." Rourke chuckled, nodding to the men behind him. "See, that's where you never understood. Men like us don't stay buried. We dig ourselves out. We crawl back with teeth sharper than before." Daniel reached for the pistol tucked in the back of his jeans. Ava didn't say a word. She just clung to his shirt, eyes locked on Rourke like she knew instinctively. This was the man the shadows had warned her about. Rourke lifted a finger. One of his men raised a shotgun. That's when Gage moved. Like lightning, he stepped into the open, drawing a weapon from beneath his coat and firing twice. Clean, direct, center mass. One of the bikers dropped, the others scattered, shots ripping through the air. Daniel shoved Ava behind the container and returned fire, his hand steady even though his heart was trying to escape his chest. It was chaos. The sounds of metal, bullets, rage. Gage took a hit to the shoulder but didn't flinch. He rolled, dropped a second man with brutal precision, then grabbed a crowbar off the ground and launched himself at a third, cracking bone with the force of everything he'd held in for 20 years. Daniel saw Rourke trying to flank them and moved to intercept, but he wasn't fast enough. Gage was. He tackled Rourke head-on, driving him into the dirt with such violence it stunned even the others. They wrestled, fists flying, grunts like animals in the dark. Rourke got a knife out. It sank deep into Gage's side. Ava screamed. Daniel fired a shot that barely missed Rourke's leg. The man hissed and fled, dragging himself behind the van. Tires squealed. What was left of the gang peeled out into the night, leaving smoke and silence behind. Daniel rushed to Gage, who lay on his back, blood soaking through his shirt. His breathing was rough, shallow, but his eyes were still focused. "You good?" Gage muttered, coughing. "You're the one bleeding," Daniel said, voice cracking. A faint smile. "Not the first time. Won't be the last." Ava knelt beside them, tears in her eyes, hands shaking. "Stay with us." Gage reached up, touched her face gently and whispered, "I already did." Then his hand dropped, and the night swallowed the sound. The house was quiet for days after the fight. Too quiet. Daniel didn't know what he expected. Sirens, questions, maybe even handcuffs. But none of that came. The yard stayed still, the mailbox untouched, and the world moved on like it hadn't nearly ended at the edge of town. Gage was gone. No hospital records, no body, no trace. Just silence. Daniel had patched up the cut on his arm himself. Ava hadn't gone back to school yet. She barely spoke, drifting from room to room like her soul had been pulled somewhere she couldn't follow. Sometimes he'd catch her on the back porch, staring out into the trees where the wind whispered through the branches like someone might answer. He knew that kind of waiting. He'd lived it after his brother died, but this was different. This time it wasn't grief wrapped in guilt. It was something else. Then 3 days later, Daniel found the envelope. No stamp, no return address, just his name, scrawled in that rough, sharp handwriting. Inside was a single page, weathered and marked with blood in the corner, like it had been written in the middle of chaos and folded quickly. He read it in the dim light of the hallway, hand steady but heart buckling with each word. "Daniel, you don't have to forgive me. I wouldn't. What I took from you can't be undone. But I gave back what I could. I watched her grow up from a distance, kept my promise when no one else could. Your wife saved my life once, long before the prison, before the fight. I owed her, and I owed you the truth. I just didn't know how to give it without breaking everything. For what I took, I gave all I had left. G. Daniel sat on the steps for an hour after reading it, letter folded between his fingers like a confession too late to throw away. He didn't cry. Not then, not even when Ava came outside, saw the paper in his hands, and asked softly, "Did he say goodbye?" "No," Daniel said. He said something better. She leaned into him, head on his shoulder, and for the first time since the storm, he felt her breathing settle. They never heard from him again. No one in town asked questions. The sheriff, who might have dug deeper, conveniently left the file untouched. The lumber yard sat abandoned, the blood washed away by rain. But sometimes, on the coldest mornings, Daniel would see fresh tire tracks near the edge of the woods. Not from a car, not from a truck. Wide, deep, like a bike had come through just long enough to look and leave. Ava would smile when she saw them. Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Some debts aren't meant to be paid in words, and some peace comes only after the price has been bled from the soul.